Welcome to this episode of What I Want to Show You. I'm Char. I'm a teacher, administrator, and education leader who lives in the United States along the shoreline of Lake Erie near Cleveland, Ohio. And I'm passionate about making learning connections where others may not see them. And one of those connections I was able to make was with generative AI and how it is impacting the world of education. And through that, I met my friend and colleague, Laura.
I'm Laura. I live in Cape Town, South Africa, and I've always been passionate about the transformative and possibilities of education, especially EdTech. And now, as AI and generative AI explodes, the possibilities have become endless. And that was how I met Char.
So we're going to spend the next 30 minutes sharing what we want you to see at the intersection of ideas and experiences. We have realized that despite our very different backgrounds, locations, and experiences, we have a lot of commonalities that we didn't expect. So we thought that you might have some as well, and we'd like to share ours with you. So I think it's funny today, we've always tried to weave in generative AI, Laura, but the focus on our conversation today is around joy and creativity and perseverance and persistence and kind of that balance and finding it in education. But I have to say that talking about fudge with you this morning was a great introduction to prioritizing and finding joy, because we spent a good 10 minutes before we started our podcast today just talking about the varieties of fudge that are available in my area in the United States and how they differ from the fudge that you have. Yet both kinds bring us joy.
That they do. Joy and high blood sugar, I think.
Yes, I think the idea of thinking about fudge, so let's go with that because it looks so delicious after staring at pictures of it today. When I think about prioritizing things in classrooms, we view fudge, I think, as a treat. It's not something that you would make every day or that you would eat every day, but it brings us joy and we ration it for ourselves. And I'm just thinking, in classrooms, don't we do that sometimes for our students instead of starting lessons and units and activities with the dessert piece, this is what we can work towards. This is delicious. This is something that's going to bring you joy, and it's pulling together all these ideas. We instead start with the small pieces and focus just on those little pieces. And eventually students get the opportunity to see how those all come together and they can have fudge. And maybe we're wrong in thinking that.
So I've been speaking to somebody a lot, a colleague as well, who's quite far along in the whole generative AI space, and he's also always said with coding, I cannot remember what he calls it, but he talks about showing somebody what they can do first, and then saying, okay, this is now how you do it. So you first show them what they can get to get them interested and fun. But my question with generative AI and learning is, why can't it all be dessert? Sure, there are going to be some boring parts. He usually applies that to coding, but why can't it all be dessert? I've seen children now, a child in particular, a preteen, who learns something every time I tell her to go ahead with ChatGPT. She learns so much, and yet she never feels like she's learning. She goes down these rabbit holes of learning, and she's having fun all the time, but she goes away with a better understanding. She looks things up. She now understands. She looked up the difference between revolution and evolution, which we know are very different things. But for a preteen, she'd heard both words, didn't know what either of them meant. Now she knows what both of them mean. She's looked up concepts and things, and it never feels she wants to do it. And I'm just, why can't we have dessert all the time? And you had in your blog post, you put about the excitement and the perseverance and the joy and wonderment that you can get from everything, if you can just tie it to if you can relate it. And we have there's so much possibility right now if we just look for it.
You know what? I do think you were talking about perseverance, and perseverance leads to joy sometimes because you are following that, you're going down that rabbit hole, or you're digging into trying to figure out how to do something, and you're persevering in doing that. And when you accomplish it, I think there's a different kind of joy than what people sometimes think is joy, is that kind of immediate gratification piece. It's maybe a more fulfilling joy when you've persevered or you've thought creatively about something and you've done the work to bring it into being, or to fill that idea out, or to build that understanding. That is definitely a different kind of joy. And I think helping students to see not just what is possible, but what is possible that is connected to what they're interested and passionate about, leads to that kind of joy. And I don't know why it can't happen in classrooms all the time. Well, I do know why. I think teaching textbook-based learning, where learning is packaged into neat little chapters with specified activities, versus constructing learning where, rather than a text, you're building the resources and the contexts that you need around your learning. I don't know.
And
What do you think about that idea?
I think that joy can also lead back to perseverance again, you get those small little endorphin hits. And then I think with joy and perseverance, it's a very much, it becomes a virtuous cycle. And you were talking about the textbook bound. So when I was in high school, they revamped all our textbooks, and some of them had really fun exercises in them. And the teachers skipped over those parts. They skipped over the fun parts. And I think the problem there is also that there was a time constraint, so skip over the fun parts. I don't think it was the teacher's fault. I think it was a time constraint. Also, what I've seen a lot is when they try to make things fun, they tack them on. They're not integrated into the learning. And I mean, there are some amazing teachers out there, but you do what you have to do to get the kids through this standardized assessment, which is just, we need to rethink assessment, we need to rethink learning, we need to wonder if education is actually, if we don't need to just completely, I know I get a lot of flack for this. Every time I say revolutionize, people go, yes, well, you can just integrate AI. That's not what I mean at all. I mean, completely reimagine how we do this.
Well, I think it's the disruptive side. There's positive ways to be a disruptor. And generative AI certainly is a disruptor. It has the potential to, as you said, kind of make it dessert every day, where students can ask those questions and then work alongside a teacher. The teacher then becomes the probing question asker, build those bridges between concepts that kids maybe aren't seeing, to get them going in the right direction using an AI tool, or to help them to sit side by side with them, and both of you work together within the generative AI and your classroom environment to build those desserts. For your friend who wanted to learn those definitions, the difference between evolution and revolution, those definitions differ depending on the context that you're using them.
Yes.
And
yes,
for her, she knew the context that she'd been hearing and reading those terms in. So her learning about those and investigating them was as a result of the context that was meaningful to her. Ultimately, she knows now what those terms mean, at least in that context, but it wasn't because they showed up on a vocabulary list. She got the dessert. She was given, here's some things to read that you may find interesting or intriguing to you. And she is willing to persevere, to put in the work, to figure out what those terms were. Because then she was like, oh, yes, now I see this, whatever I'm reading and hearing, in a different light. Oh, that makes sense to me. That's Francis Su is a professor of mathematics at Howard Mudd College in California, and he's done a lot of work around thinking differently about math and flourishing in math. And I know we're talking about dessert, and most people don't think about math as dessert, but I think in this case, he is talking about creativity and joy, and the joy that comes from shifting perspectives and points of view, and how you can do that through math, see things in different ways. And when you see it in a different way, it's like, oh, wow, I didn't know that it was that, or I didn't know about this, or this is intriguing to me. And I think that piece, from his perspective, is don't teach the skills, teach the joy, creativity, perseverance, shift perspective side of things. That's what our whole podcast has been about. It's me and you talking about our different views on things and how much fun we have every time we sit down to talk about something, because something that you say makes me go, I hadn't considered it like that, but now that I do, oh, let's go in this direction. This seems like it would be fun and interesting to talk about and explore. And like, that is the dessert of learning. That kind of give and take and perspective sharing and shifting, I think, is what's bringing joy. And we're not getting there in many classrooms for many students.
You're so right. We have these, they feel like rambling conversations, but we're learning from them. It's like this exploratory adventure, and that is what I've seen in my young friend, and that is what I believe that education could be. That's what learning should be. It should be an exploratory adventure. It should spark thoughts and questions, and that's what talking to you does for me. And it's what I would love to see for children, because learning shouldn't be a chore. It shouldn't be this thing that you do grudgingly because you have to. It doesn't need to be that way. I've often said that school doesn't need to be the torture it is, but nothing needs is learning. Learning is an amazing thing. If you can just allow children to do that. I wrote an article the other day about how we could incorporate experiential hands-on learning and AI, put them together so that learning becomes an activity that you're involved in, something that you explore. So the example I used is, like, say you're working about the life cycle of plants. You go plant to plant, you actually plant a seedling, and then you ask AI how to care for it and those sorts of things. And your assessment's not sitting down, it's if your plant grows, and then it's not cheating, it's learning. There's none of this cheating nonsense in it. Your plant grows, you're learning. And you can test the pH. It can cover a whole lot of subjects at once, communication skills, biology, pH, science, whatever. And the beauty of that somebody else actually pointed out to me is that will reduce burnout for teachers. They will facilitate learning, which is, I think, what most teachers actually want when they become teachers. They don't want to stand in a classroom and have lots of bored children stare at them, while they just say the same things over and over, year after year. They want to develop young minds. They want to shape the future. I think that's what most teachers want.
It's what brings joy to classrooms. When you see joy in classrooms, it's the classroom where the teacher and the students are wondering about something, or exploring something, or investigating something, or having deep conversation and poking at each other's thinking about something, or trying iterative thinking and new processes. You hear that in the engagement in the students' voices, and you see that in the joy you see on the teacher's face. The teachers at the end of their career do not pull out a drawer full of grade books and say, look at what I've accomplished in my career. Here are 27 years of my grade books, and with all of the assignments and all the points that students learned. And like, that's not where they found joy. That isn't it. They found joy in the stories that they will then share with you about, Thomas, who struggled here, but then we worked together and I found that thing that made the connection for Thomas. And all of a sudden, a light bulb went off in his head and I couldn't stop him. He just kept going and going and wanting more. And, that was so exciting. Or the time that I had these students who were so interested in exploring climate science that they started their own research on the side and then pulled it into class and then wanted to do this with it and became so passionate about it. It's like teachers shared those stories as the times that they saw joy and success in what they've done, not their grade book, not their assignments. And I think reminding them of that, it's like, hey, look, generative AI has the potential to help you to create all of these stories that are connected to students, that you're finding joy in, that you see value in what you're bringing. I was at the math conference in my state last week, and a career professor who had spent time teaching middle school and high school and then had worked in the university level teaching pre-service teachers for a long time. We're talking 45, 50-year educator career that she's talking about. And she was talking about the same thing that we're talking about, Laura, that need to find joy in your classroom. She called it, wait, I have to tell you her terms because I think it was relevant to what we're talking about. She said we have to eliminate math from our class, but she didn't say it was math, M period, A period, T period, H period. And what she meant was mental abuse to humans. She said that, what we have to focus on are things like empathy and diverse representation starting in preschool, and the students' abilities to see themselves, and that we don't need to be judging students. We should trust them and give them top opportunities to talk with each other about their thinking and explore their thinking before we crush their thinking with right answer mindset. Give them those opportunities. And, then I heard Frances Sue talking about the importance of finding a balance between finding the right answer and the joy of getting to an answer, and that it's okay to not get there sometimes, that it's enough that you've thought through things and haven't come up with an answer yet. Okay. And I heard from Kurt Russell, who's the National Teacher of the Year for the United States. And he teaches in a district very close to me. And he talked about how children find joy and engage and light up when they see themselves in the learning and see their lived experiences in the learning and feel heard and seen in their classrooms. And, I've talked about that before, like how hard it is if you're a child that isn't fitting, and you can't see yourself in any of the work. Like, where's the joy in that? Like, where are you ever going to feel engaged with what you're working on?
So I actually had a friend, everything you say is so true. I had a friend who taught so there's a very prestigious boys' private school in Cape Town. It's where all the teachers want to end up, And she ended up there. She was a fantastic teacher, and she was desperately unhappy because she had to stick to everything. They've got their reputation to uphold, all of those things. And then she left and she went to a technical high school where there's a lot more application. Things are a lot more hands-on. And she found her joy there. And it was a lot less prestige, a lot less money, a lot less, but she found the joy that she actually wanted. She got to teach children who wanted to learn, but who were not fitting into these little boxes. And you were talking about teachers who have these light bulb moments bring them joy. these stories, and these are the kinds of stories that she had now, because they weren't all just, you know, children whose parents were wealthy and whose, you know, careers were laid out for them and who'd done expensive courses and study methods and all of this. These were kids who were exploring learning, and she was getting to teach them not only how to learn, but how to engage with the world, and how to persevere, and how to use their joy, and how to channel it. And it brought her joy, and it brought them joy. So it's not only for the students, it's for the teachers as well. That's what I think what brings fulfillment for both. And we talk about continuous learning, but if you never learn that, you never learn to experience that joy, you never learn to do that exploration, you never learn this adventure, what amazing adventure learning can be. How can we expect people to then grow up and be continuous learners when learning has never been anything but what? Mental abuse
Right.
of the
Right.
other people.
Like,
Yeah.
stop the mental abuse to humans.
Yes.
Well, I was thinking too, as you were talking about that, where generative AI can be an assist in this model, because if as teachers, we want to continue to grow our own learning, and we look back at Francis Sue's work on perspective shifting and points of view, and we think about Kurt Russell's talk about students' lived experiences and being able to see themselves, the common thread there is opportunities to grow and expand your own point of view and your own perspectives by hearing the experiences of others in that shared environment. And generative AI has the potential that you could sit down and say, hey, here's what I've got. This is what my kids are interested in. Here's where my students are wanting to go exploring. That's not my lived experience. I don't have any learning around this, but I want to support them in moving forward. Here's the skills that I would like to bury in that learning, you know, like the sprinkles on the dessert. Like, here are the skills. ChatGPT, these are my skills. Here's their lived experiences. Help me build activities that will push their thinking, expand their thinking, allow them to explore these things within this context, and then give them a new context that may be intriguing to them. That takes so much time as a teacher to build that out. But if instead you can work with ChatGPT, and the kids can together with you, and have ChatGPT not do the learning, I think that's the biggest misconception. Like, you don't let the technology do the learning for you. You have to use it as a tool to do your own learning. And I think that's one way to use it, to build these like engaging opportunities, to sit down as a class and start feeding things into it. Like, hey, here, I'm going to teach you this. I need you to ask me questions or make suggestions that will help me to start to learn these things in a different way for myself.
And you should be encouraged to use it. Like, I hesitate to say this, especially here where access to technology is not universal, but in the ideal world, it would be universal, and kids could all go home and they could use ChatGPT to explore things for their homework. So instead of letting it do their homework, explore it, learn from it. So what's the difference actually between finding your answers in textbook and finding them in ChatGPT?
I think the difference, I mean, you can do that. You can absolutely turn to the back of your textbook and find the answer key, or you can skim through the chapter and find the boldface words and the facts. I think the difference is that when you sit down in front of ChatGPT, you get a blank box. And when you sit down in front of your textbook, you get curated, packaged information.
Yes, but
so you can ask questions of your text. You absolutely can. You can ask questions of the text, and and explore within that text to find those perspectives. And if it's a well-done text, hopefully you find multiple perspectives or multiple opportunities to think through something. But the textbook isn't going to, a physical textbook isn't going to expand on that for you. Like, oh, I just read this one paragraph because that's how much space we had in this thing for this. I've read this one paragraph. I have questions. I would like to learn more about that. I don't know if I agree with that. I'm not sure I understand that. Then what do you do? So now I've read this and it's not making sense to me, or I want to explore further. Now my choice is what? Then the textbook fails you, because the textbook is only going to get you so far. Generative AI like ChatGPT, you sit down, it may present you with that information when you ask it, but then you can continue to ask it and you continue to question it, and you can have it question you. And you can, if you see an aha moment like, I wonder if it's like this, type. Yes, it could be like this. Here's how it could be like this. And here's where you can make that connection. Oh, I wonder if I were to try this, what would it do differently? Type. It's that engaging piece that a textbook by itself at a student's home isn't going to provide. That's my perspective.
Exactly true. That's the point I was actually trying to make, is that what's the difference when it comes to, people talk about cheating. There's no difference in finding information. It just means you can go deeper. It gives you the opportunity for those rabbit holes. It gives you the opportunity. I've spoken about this before, that I fell off the calculus wagon because my teacher couldn't explain it to me. And if I had had ChatGPT, then it would never have had to happen. I could have gone, okay, my teacher can't explain it. I can come home and I can ask ChatGPT. I have asked it in the meantime. In the past year, I thought, okay, the time has come. Explain this concept to me, and it did. And I was like, this is a eureka moment. If I had had this 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago.
Oh, that's what it is.
That's what.
Oh, if you had said that to me in that way, I would have had that light bulb moment 22 years
it's 25 years later, but still.
Oh, and that moment, going back to Flourishing in Math and Francis Su, he talks about that. Those moments, like when he shared a story of his son, who is 3, who loves helicopters, likes helicopters, likes to look at helicopters, likes to look at pictures of helicopters, likes the sound helicopters makes, really into helicopters. And they were in a store, and his 3-year-old son started excitedly making helicopter sounds and pointing at the ceiling. And he was like, I have no idea what he's doing. We're inside the store. There are no helicopters. I'm looking around. I don't see pictures of helicopters. We're not in the toy aisle. There are no helicopters. And then I looked up at what he was pointing at, and it was the ceiling fan. And his son was making that connection between those two things and finding joy in it. Like, oh, look, that's like a helicopter. It has blades. It's rotating. It's moving air. Like, that's really interesting. What can I do with that? It's that. It's ChatGPT help you do that. And I do think it is an equity piece, Laura. You and I have talked about this in prior conversations, that the children that live in your city have a wide range of access to technology, or learning for that matter, formalized learning versus informal learning. And we have all these technology tools, but if you don't have that technology, then what?
Well, there are schools that have none whatsoever in my city.
So there's no technology, and here we are talking about here's this big disruptive thing that's going to change education. It's like, well, it's not going to change education for thousands and thousands of children because they don't even have access to it. So I guess that's why we should never think of technology as anything more than a tool, because that shouldn't prevent those children from finding joy in their own learning. And maybe the next step is making sure the teachers have some access to the technology, and then figuring out how we can give students who have phones more efficient access to that technology.
So the Western Cape Education Department is actually they're trying to upskill their teachers now, so that even the kids can't go down, maybe go home and go down a rabbit hole. They can bring the teacher their questions to the teacher, and they should go the whole class. Okay, let's explain. Let's explore that. So there are, I think, creative ways to. They're not going to be necessarily quite as, but there are creative ways to incorporate it to make it better. A lot of the poorer schools also, for example, with my seedling example, they have things like food gardens. So there are community initiatives. The kids can then grow healthy food and take it home.
And there's
So
so
they
much
learn,
learning can happen in that garden space.
right. So they already have things like that. So if you then have a teacher who can use it not as an extracurricular activity, but as a learning experience with ChatGPT, and the kids can ask questions, and the teacher can facilitate that kind of that exploration. Pardon me. Then we've still got, you've still got the possibility, just maybe not as widespread. I think that it can be done.
Well, it goes back to taking that action, that disruptor action. I mean, it's uncomfortable to advocate for things people aren't interested in providing. I think we have to continue through work that we both do in very different kinds of spaces to advocate for that dessert first, dessert always approach to teaching, that reminding teachers that the things that bring them joy are not lugging home the papers to grade. That's not bringing them joy, and it didn't bring their students joy to create those things. It's like, if you recognize and prioritize what brings you joy, and the stories that you're telling about students who engaged in and brought their own learning here and brought their own experiences here and started to see things differently and explore this and apply this, if that's what's bringing you joy, and that's what you're saying brings your students joy, then why aren't you doing more of that? I guess that's the ultimate question, right? Why are you limiting yourselves to one box of fudge as a special event? And, why aren't you saying, no, I'm not going to continue to do this? We're still learning those skills, and we're learning them through important things like joy and perseverance and creativity and collaboration by doing these great things. And ChatGPT can take the time barrier away, because ChatGPT can make the development of those kinds of opportunities more efficient and take that cognitive lift off, so that you really can focus on the joy of learning with your students when you're not having to find all the ingredients for the fudge, stand over the hot stove for 2 hours stirring the fudge, waiting for it to cool. If you can just get the fudge and spend the time trying it out and exploring it, that maybe is our next step, is encouraging that and modeling that.
Sure, I'm finding this so hard because every single thing you say is sparking a thought, and then I have to not interrupt you. So forgive me. Thing is, fudge, as I was explaining to you, fudge that we know is basically sugar, but there are lots of delicious things that are healthy. Really delicious things that still count as dessert that are healthy. So it's not bad to have dessert all the time. It's about balanced desserts, I think,
Well, it's about the thing that you're looking forward to. Isn't that
It's
really what dessert is? It's the thing you're looking forward to. It's the
yes,
thing that
it's the thing you enjoy. That's the best
you
part.
enjoy. And that whether it is a healthy choice or a not healthy choice or some blend thereof, ultimately it's what you're looking forward to. And when we dangle those dessert activities and lessons out in front of kids as if you slog through this, you'll be able to have this with your learning. But first you must eat this. And the kids sit and push this around on their plate. Like, I don't really want to eat this. So you cut it into little pieces and you try to hide it under the applesauce and pour ketchup on it to drown out the taste and feed it to the dog under the table or whatever it takes to get this off your plate so that you can get to the dessert. Like, why are we doing that? Why on earth are we continuing to do that in education? Like, just
Why
stop.
do they have to? They don't have to eat the broccoli.
Right.
I mean, I love broccoli, just to be clear, but there are very few little kids who do, but they don't have to do that. They don't have to do the boring parts. They don't have to be, because the actual truth is, when we grow up, and which is when we thought we would just have dessert all the time anyway, and then we end up not doing it. We love broccoli, but when we grow up, we get to do self-directed learning that we enjoy. Why can't we let kids do learning they enjoy? Why do they have to grow up and suffer through 12 years of absolute boredom and slog work when it can be fun all the time? That's how we create kids who are curious, who are inquiring, who are enthusiastic.
And how do we make that the norm? Because there's certainly buckets of that. There are amazing teachers in the world who see this already and are doing this. And they're in every building. Every building has teachers who see it and get it. And then there's teachers who, for whatever reason, aren't there yet. So I think that's where so much of my work is right now. Helping teachers find that joy again, or if they've never had it, like, this is where it is, like, and showing them that it isn't hard. It doesn't take all that extra time. You can do things with what you've got, and because you have the most important things in front of you, right? You have your kids, like, see them as the resource to drive the learning. They'll always be in front of you. It's not about what book you have or what tool you have. You do have them sitting there. They have little brains that are full of questions and full of experiences and things they've noticed, and use them. Like, so let's start with them.
Yes, that is such an important point.
Maybe that's a good point to end on. Let's reflect on that, because I'm going to make a note for us. I think that would be a really interesting topic for us to expand further on. With seeing students as the primary learning resource in your classroom,
which is just better for everyone.
And what they're interested in and what they're asking about. Let's explore that further in our next.
How they participate. Yes, I'm finding it difficult to let this go now.
Right. But we're going to, because otherwise we're going to have a 3-hour-long podcast. So
yes.
So if you all find this interesting, we know that there is so much more to see than what we shared today. We've discovered that ourselves. We'd love for you to show us what you see, or use our conversation today as an opportunity to share what you see with others. And I hope you join us for our next podcast, where we're going to continue to explore this topic together and find joy in it. Laura, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts today.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for sharing your joy.